Hello everyone and welcome back to this episode of Rebooting, where we have a guest that basically needs no introduction whatsoever. He's also known as the Human Hacker, the CEO of Social-Engineer LLC, and he actually created the social engineering framework, which we all now use as professionals. He's also the brains behind Social Engineering Village at DEF CON. So welcome to Chris Hadnagy.
Thank you. I should hire you as, what were those old, like in the British times, the ancient, the medieval, they had those squires that came out and announced, like, hear ye, here is this loser, and he sounds awesome.
Can we do that next DEF CON? That's what we're going to do.
Yeah, you get to come in, but you have to wear one of those outfits. You have to have a big trumpet, and then you have to do, like, you have to walk in the room, and you have to,
like a jousting pole or something.
Yes, yeah, I think that you ride a horse in, that would be, or unicorn.
I can totally do that. I can totally do that. That's fine. I think this is doable. This is sorted. This is a plan. You can hold us to it now.
I'm putting this in my calendar. Lisa on unicorn. Okay, done. It is done.
Okay, so I have to ask you, because your job is incredibly interesting. How would your family describe what you do?
That is a really great question. So I'm going to give you two answers. I'm going to give you one past tense because my daughter described it perfectly when she was about 5 or 6. She was in school and the teacher asked the class, what does your parents do for a living? And my daughter said, my daddy breaks into banks for a living. And the teacher said, it's not nice to lie about your father. And she goes, I'm not lying. My daddy breaks into banks and he's breaking into a bank today. He's not even home. So she got yelled at by the teacher, and the teacher called my wife, who said, Mrs. Hadnagy, I want to talk to you about Amaya. She lied in class. She said that your husband breaks into banks. And he's like, she said, my wife, love her. No, that's true. That's what he's doing this week. And the teacher got really upset and went, you should keep your family business at home. Bam. So I came home and my wife's telling me this story. I'm like, but did you tell her it was a pen test? Did you just say, like, she's like, oh no, that would have been good. I'm like, the teacher thinks I'm a bank robber. Like, this is not. So.
So at the next parent teacher conference, that's a bit awkward then.
It's a little awkward, But now let's see how does my family now? So the odd part is almost all of my family worked for me. So that's a little interesting. But I think they would describe as, I've heard them say, my dad is a good criminal who gets paid to act like he's bad.
That's quite good. I quite like that.
It's okay.
Yeah, that's better than bank robber.
It's better than bank robber, like with no qualification, just end sentence. That's it. Bank robber. I'm not sure if I like that.
I think that's the best answer I think I've ever had on this show, actually. That would take some beating for sure. But I want to start talking about, I want to talk obviously about social engineering, but specifically the sort of darker side of social engineering that's a bit more complex, because I think people often think social engineering and they think that sort of quick and dirty phishing email or whatever. But we live in a world now where corporate espionage or industrial espionage is rife. Biden said the other day that he had to take a hard line with China because they're stealing so much intellectual property. And I had a case that I want to pick your brains about, actually, that I worked on, where this gentleman was befriended online, and over the course of sort of 6 or 7 months, he ended up becoming convinced by this person online to sort of go into his company, steal some IP, and then email it out to this gentleman. And I kind of want to get your thoughts on it, especially, how much harder do you think it is for an attacker to do this sort of long-winded social engineering attack?
So I have a question for you before I answer that. In this case that you worked, was the person knowledgeable that they were doing something bad, or were they convinced that it was a good thing? Like, was it like a BEC scam where they thought they were paying a real vendor, or did they fully know, I'm stealing this and giving it to this person?
They thought they were acting as a whistleblower. So they sort of knew that they were doing something wrong, but they thought it was for a super moral purpose.
Yeah. I think that is, so that's easier than the insider threat where someone is doing something they know is wrong, but not as easy as the standard SD attack that's short term, because long-term SE attacks require rapport in a relationship, right? So if I'm trying to SE you or vice versa, you have, and it's going to be a long-term con. If you blow your pretext at any point, I catch you. And as soon as I catch you, rapport is gone, trust is gone, all those great chemicals in my brain are gone, and now you have to work really hard to get it back, or I'm just like, nope, I'm done with you, goodbye. So longer term SE takes some skill because you have to keep the con going for a bit of time. So that example sounds like it would have been quite a skilled attacker to do that.
Yeah, and I think, sometimes, I don't know what it's like in the States, but here in the UK, I think a lot of companies focus very heavily on personal identifiable information and protecting that. Don't necessarily realize that perhaps what's more valuable in this situation is commercially sensitive information. How do you sort of find that in the States?
That's interesting. So you guys have that, I always get the acronym wrong. Is it GP or GDPR? GDPR. So you guys have that, which was designed to kind of help protect that PII, right? We don't necessarily have that. Most of our breaches release an inordinate amount of PII all over the place. It's just crazy how much of that's floating around the internet. In addition, we do some pretty dumb things here in this country. Like when you buy a house, that's public record. Not only your name, but your address and what you paid for it. That's public record. You can look that up. You have to buy that with a trust fund or something if you want someone to not know. So you could find my house and what I paid for it online for free. You don't even pay for that crap. You can find out what I pay in taxes for my house every year. You can find that. That's all free. When you get married, that's put in the newspaper. When you have a baby, that's put in the newspaper. So we in this country, we treat PI almost as, well, everyone should know this, right? Now, I think in the last, let's say 3 to 5 years, people are going, but wait, we're getting hacked because all of this. How is this happening? And then they're like, well, you see, this is all online, people. And now I think there's a smartening up, but it's not quick enough to handle it. So we don't handle it too much. And then on the other side of that coin from your question, which I think is really valuable, is I think most employees are not educated to know the value of the information they hold. I can't tell you how many times we've hacked a company because I had someone on the phone tell me they're a dumpster company, but who handles their bins, their trash? So who comes and empties that? Who comes and takes the big bins away outside? And somebody was like, well, why does that matter? It's like, because now I just made a uniform with the waste company's name on it and a hat, and I came into your facility because you expected me to be there because I look just like the guy that's supposed to come and empty your bins. Right. So when you give that information away, you may think, but who cares about who does this? That's the very thing that we use to get into your organization. Yeah, and I think, have you ever had a situation where you sort of thought a pretext that you'd built, there was no way it was going to work? Yes, like all the time. I had a pretext. Oh my gosh, it was like so bad that we were going to go out to this company, this organization that we knew just had a groundbreaking ceremony, and we were sent by the local newspaper to go do photography. So both of us had camera gear, and we were going to go, and this was a secure facility. It was protected by armed guards, and we went out there and had the name of a local editor from a newspaper, and we had a woman in our office with a local number that was, if they called it, would have been routed to her. So if they got that number, she would answer it as that editor. We had it all set up, and I said, there's just no way this is going to work. And we ended up getting arrested, but I'll tell you why. It did work. Like we were about to get our IDs and badges to be let in, and one of the guards, you can't plan this crap, one of the guards behind the counter, his cousin was the editor at this newspaper. So when he heard me saying, oh yeah, we work for Lisa over at this newspaper, he texted his editor, his cousin, and said, hey, your photographers are here, that's cool. And she went, my what? And he's like, your photographer. She's like, I didn't send any. So I didn't notice at the time. He sneaks around the corner, he snaps a picture of me through the glass, and he sends it to her, and she's like, I don't know who that is. So they come running around the counter with automatic weapons. They get us on the ground. They arrest us. It was really freaky, But it was like we had our badges. We were just about to be let into this facility unattended because of that pretext, and I thought that shouldn't work. And then what are the chances of that though? There's Well,
so
we get out of the chance, like it's like so like 0.0, like you can't statistically figure it out. Like, how would that guy's cousin just happen to be the one editor from all the newspapers in that state that we chose to pretext as, and that guy's cousin is that woman?
it's
Ridiculous.
classic, isn't it? Do you ever feel nervous, like just before you go in, or do you think you've done it so many times now that you just?
I tell my people, the day you stop feeling nervous is the day you should find a new career. I mean, I think nerves let you know that you still care, right? So if I'm nervous about breaking into a place, or if I'm nervous about a vision call, or if I'm nervous about a speech or a podcast, that lets me know that I still care about doing it good.
Mm-hmm.
And the day that I'm not nervous, and I don't mean I shouldn't, I don't have intense fear anymore. I'm not standing outside the door like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like, I'm not like, what if I get arrested? Yeah, I get arrested. Like that week, we got arrested 5 times that week, but that happens. You know what I mean? Like, it's no big deal. I mean, and 3 of those times were at gunpoint. Whatever, it happens. It's okay. So I don't get nervous about that stuff, but I get nervous. Like, what if I fail miserably, or what if I take it too far and one of us gets shot, or, that kind of stuff makes me nervous. But,
yeah, we don't have that. It's more high risk stakes, I guess, in the US than.
You don't have guns.
We don't have guns.
You guys are smart. You don't have to worry about getting killed so quickly. Yeah, we have guns everywhere here. Everywhere.
Yeah. That's a topic for a very different podcast, though.
Very different podcast. You can buy a gun at Walmart if you want. Here's my bread, my apples, peanut butter. Oh, a gun.
Yeah, I did actually do some work in Texas this last year. And it did sort of surprise me just how many guns were everywhere. I mean, coming from someone who lives in a country where there are no guns, to that, it was just a bit of a culture shock, to be honest.
I mean, Texas too. Like, if you went to a more, like if you went to Maine or something, you probably would have felt a little more at home. But Texas, like, people just carry guns on their belts. Like, everyone has a gun. Like, you come out of the womb and you're like, hey, baby, here's a gun. Like, guns are everywhere there. That's like, they don't give their babies a bottle. Like, here's a gun. It's like, that's terrible.
Very different, poles apart, Europe and
yeah. So I came to the UK, right, and I have this knife that I carry everywhere with me, right, and it's a switchblade, and I came to the UK and I had it in my pocket, and I'm in class, and a box came and I had to cut the box open, so I pull my knife out and I do this, and everybody in the class freaks out. They're like, whoa, 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 and I'm like, whoa, what? Everyone calm down. I'm just cutting the box, and I cut the box and put it away. Well, I had 2 government agents from the UK in the class, and they came up and they're like, you got to take that back to your room, put it in the suitcase, do not have it. Like, that blade is too long to carry. It's illegal. And I'm like, what are you talking? First time I was training in the UK, I learned my lesson quick. You guys, like, don't have a lot of weapons there.
Mm-mm. But we also do knife crime better than anybody else in Europe. So
you do knife crime better. Is that like a sort of competition?
It's actually a slogan now at Heathrow Airport. You can see it.
We do knife crime. That's great. Don't remind me not to fly into Heathrow.
Yeah. But getting back to what we were just talking about with espionage and longer term cons, because obviously one of the other things that is quite interesting is from coronavirus, the explosion of like romance fraud and relationship fraud. So if you were giving somebody some advice of someone they've met online, what sort of advice would you give them as to how they establish whether this person is genuinely wanting to be their friend or their relationship partner, or whether they're, leading up to being conned?
Yeah, this is a really hard question. It really is, because all the answers involve tech, like doing OSINT. Like, I would suggest go do OSINT on that person. But if you're talking to not you or me, you're talking to a layperson, they're like, do what? How do I do that? And they don't. And then, like, another answer I tell people is, as soon as you start to feel overly emotional in any relationship, you should analyze what's the ask, right? So, like, like, let's say I didn't know you, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, you hit me up on LinkedIn, and you're like, hey, I want you to come on this podcast, and I'm like, oh, that's cool, that's really nice. I should take a look at who she is. And I look at your LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, wow, look, she's really attractive. Then I think, oh, am I being catfished? What is this all about? And then all of a sudden, if your asks changed from podcast to, yeah, we just charge a small fee to come on and we market you and promote you, that kind of critical thinking is where I should go, wait, the ask changed drastically. Like you went
Mhm.
from, hey, let's be friends and just, I'm going to interview you, to I want money. In a dating sense, the hard part is if you're meeting someone online to date, your emotions are already involved, right? So
Yep.
you're already getting your emotions involved. You're already saying, hey, I'm investing something from my feelings into this, which means you're already shutting down critical thinking infrastructure.
Mhm.
So that's why the answer is so hard, because a lot of these, I don't know if the UK is the same thing, but here in the US, the romance scams are happening where they're developing a relationship. It's taking weeks, months. And then they're like, I want to come visit. And then they're saying, oh, I got stopped at the border because of COVID. And now my visa got rejected. I need $5,000 for this visa fine. And these women normally who are being targeted, because what they're doing, and this is really cold, they're targeting women who have lost their husbands in death, because obituaries are public here in the
Oh
States.
no.
So your husband dies, they see, they see your husband's name, and then they OSINT you, and they go, oh man, Lisa, she's got some money. Let
Wow.
me hit her up, and then just go. And this is the way it works. Go on Facebook, see, maybe you're on Facebook with your friends. I can't believe I lost him. And then let's say I'm the attacker. I just hit you up and like, oh, I can't believe it. I lost my wife too a couple years ago. It will get better. Stay strong. That's it. No, nothing. Over the next few weeks, we just start chatting more and chatting more and chatting more. And it never comes to, wow, you're hot, let's do this. It's never that. It's just we develop a friendship where I
Mhm.
understand, I listen, I give you that emotional comfort that you're lacking right now. And then when you feel invested in me, where you say something like, wow, you're so easy to talk to, I wish we could meet in person. I would love to come. I'm just so broke right now. I can't afford a plane. What if I paid for your plane ticket? Would you come? Yes, I would glad to. And then you send me $2,000 for a plane ticket. I get stopped at the border. I need another couple grand for a visa. I get stopped again. I get arrested. I need bail money. Before you know it, you're out $10,000, $20,000, and I've never left my house.
Yeah.
And that's happening all the time here in the States.
It's insane, isn't it? And I met somebody who had actually remortgaged their house here in the UK. So raised about $300,000 basically
Oh
to
my
send to
gosh.
this guy in Colombia who had this whole story about how his gran was ill or something and he needed to buy this house. And I think the thing is, and you'll probably know this, that when you look at it as an outsider, it looks insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they've been taken down this road, down this process,
Yeah.
haven't they? So it's not like they just suddenly met someone online and the next minute they're asking for $300,000. It's a process, right?
Well, if you think about it from the psychological aspect, right? So when we meet someone for the first time, whether it's digitally or not, we take in all of the stimuli into our brainstem, right? So that's where our limbic system says, hey, do I trust this person or not? And we make that judgment generally based on very superficial things. Do I find you attractive? Do I find your words trustworthy? Do I find even your written nonverbals to be something that I think are good? Once my brain makes that decision, if I was your Mark, and I would say, yep, I trust her for these reasons. Now my neocortex only looks for proof that I'm right. It never looks for proof that I'm wrong, right? So my brain, because it wants to stay consistent with my original decision, it says, well, Chris, you can't be wrong because, you're Chris, you have to be right. So I'm going to prove why Lisa is this wonderful, trustworthy person. And then I say, oh, look at that smile. Bam, that moves that she's trustworthy. Oh, she's asking for help for her grand. Oh, look at that. She's such a good person. And my brain never says, hey, moron, that may be a scam, right? Because I've already made a decision to trust you. And it's crazy that I don't think the attackers understand brain psychology or brain chemistry, but I know they understand human nature. And
Mm-hmm.
when human nature kicks in, you're right. From an outsider perspective, you and I can read that story and go, oh my gosh, you did what? You mortgaged your house? To that person, they really believe it. There was a guy here who was getting arrested by the feds on a case that we heard about. He ended up giving money to like one of those Nigerian. It wasn't so simple as a Nigerian prince, but it was a widowed woman in Africa that needed help getting out of the country. He gave all of his money. He ended up getting divorced and using their life savings. Then he started stealing money from the university he was working at, their treasury, and giving her money.
Oh my
And when
God.
he was getting arrested, he was saying to the cops, you just want to take the prize at the end when she shares the 40 million with me. You just want that. You're greedy. You're just greedy pigs. And it was like, oh no, you really believe this so much. You believe it so much that you don't see that this is so wrong.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I guess, so that's like obviously for the relationship fraud type thing where if you meet somebody online, but what about if for a company then who hires somebody who perhaps they don't know the employee, whether they're going to be genuine, whether they're actually going to, have, be stealing intellectual property or anything like that. What sort of advice would you give to companies for the amount of vetting, and what can you actually do?
So no one that I've talked to recently is going to believe that this was not a setup, that you just asked that question. Because literally, I just had a meeting with two people in my company, and I was just saying, we need to start talking about insider threat more. And I was just saying, we need to actually start like talking about this and writing about it, because this is a topic, your question, that a lot of companies don't ask about until after. So the issue is you have an insider threat, and then all the damage is done, and then the company kicks into high gear and says, what can we do to protect us from the insider threat, or what should we have done? And then they implement all of these things. And the quick answer to your question is that you need to set up protocols in your company to protect from insider threat before you have an insider threat.
Mm-hmm.
So DLP solutions that monitor email and which files are coming in and out. Email monitoring solutions that tell you if a person is sending data outside the company network. Just proper hierarchy in your network. So it's not flat. Not that everyone has access to everything at all times, that there are sections that certain people can't access until they've been trusted. These things need to occur before you have the problem. Otherwise, it will be too late once you have the problem.
Okay, so another question that I really wanted to ask you was actually about OSINT, because unless you are incredibly lucky, social engineering is pretty impossible without OSINT, right?
OSINT's the lifeblood, right? So, I mean, of course, you can walk up to a complete stranger and you can get them to give you things. There is that level of social engineering. I mean, con men do it all the time. Street grifters do it. There is that level of SE, but the SE that you and I have been talking about on this show so far, you need to understand the target. You need to know who they are, where they go, what they like. All that stuff is necessary.
Do you think that sort of for OSINT to work, and in your experience, because obviously you've been doing SE for a very long time, do you think OSINT has got easier or harder for attackers?
That's a great question. So I'm going to say overall easier, because for a few reasons. One is there's just so many social media applications out there now that the average everyday person is using. Like, you can go back and go, Snapchat, it was just for the kids. It's not anymore. Grown adults are on Facebook. We're all on LinkedIn. We're all using Instagram now. We as a culture are putting so much more out there that I think it makes us a lot more vulnerable. And then we're just spending much more time on the internet, especially now with COVID. We're spending so much time on the internet.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And one of our subscribers has asked what is a really nasty question, so I'm sorry to ask you this. But he asked, if you had to pick one of the social media platforms, just one, which would you say would be your go-to one for gathering OSINT on a human target?
So hard. you were, whoever asked that, you're a dirty scoundrel. What? I can't get two? Okay. Like, I was just about to say Facebook, but then I thought, but LinkedIn tells me so much about their history. So it's between those two, but I'm going to go with Facebook because when I think about social engineering, yeah, I mean, corporate history and stuff is important, but really the emotions are what get people to do a thing. And Facebook tells me your family, your birthdays, your anniversaries, your vacations, where you like to eat, your hobbies, your music, your books, your clubs you're a part of. Facebook tells me all of that. And if you're using I don't know Facebook. So this back in my day, I feel like I'm ancient. Check-ins, you check in places. Sorry, I'm a little bit like ADHD or something. I'm all over the place. You didn't know you were getting Jim Carrey on that. No. Check-ins, right? So check-ins. When people check in, they tell you where they're at now. It's like, oh, I just checked in at Starbucks here, and then so Facebook is like if I could only choose one, and they said you're going to be an SE now for the rest of your life, And the only one you can use right now, it would be Facebook.
So sort of relating to emotional topics, and also OSINT, you founded the Innocent Lives Foundation, which is, I mean, I remember you and I sitting at a restaurant in Bristol having a conversation about this, and I cannot believe how fast it's grown. It's just insane.
You and me both.
And I think for those of you who don't know about this, it's an amazing foundation that tracks sort of online predators, but also aims to stop sort of the trafficking and exploitation of children around the world, which, you know, no one can argue with that. It's a very noble purpose. What I kind of want to ask you about is how did that start? Where did the idea come from? What was the motivation and the driver behind it?
So I had this pen test I was doing with a company, a very large organization. And during the pen test, to cut out all like the details, we were doing an internal scan, and we found this one IP address that was on the Tor network. And we could tell it was on Tor, but just like if you're on Tor, you can't see anything that's being done. So I asked the director or our contact, I said, is there any reason why this part of your organization would be on Tor? And he said, no, we don't have any authorization for that. He said, we want to know what he's doing. And I'm like, well, we can't see. So unless you put a keylogger on his machine. And I'm like, is this your machine? He's like, yep, we own it. I'm like, great, put a keylogger on it. So we installed the keylogger and found that this guy was, he was using corporate funds. He was flying all over the place. He was molesting children, videotaping it, and then trading those videos on the internet, on the dark web, because he didn't want to use his home computer because his wife and kids use the same computer. And I was sitting in a cafe with this director when this guy was getting cuffed and put in a car to get taken to prison. And it felt, I mean, it gives me, I don't know what you call them in the UK, but goosebumps. It gives me chills.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Same.
I sat there thinking to myself, I'm just like some greasy little hacker. I never thought I would ever do anything that led to this. Like, it felt almost like a superhero for a second, you know? And it wasn't that feeling that made me do it. It was just, I had this moment of realization that these skills I have do more than just break into companies. They can do more than just phish someone. They can do more than just be a social engineer. And it was this moment of realization where, because previous to that, my class started to get taken by actors and psychologists and teachers because they wanted to learn how to communicate better. So I was having this life crisis moment where I was like, whoa, all this stuff I built, I thought was going to be just for like pen testers. And now I got these people using this part of my life for training themselves. And I got this part that could be used by law enforcement. And I started to talk to people in my community and found that many had similar experiences, but didn't know what to do with the information. So I said, what if we had an organization where we trained and worked with people who had the skill and the desire, but got it in the right hands in law enforcement? Because the one thing that is my founding principle is vigilantism doesn't work. So going out there and just finding a list of pedos and putting their name somewhere in paste bin, it doesn't do jack crap. It doesn't do anything. So that list of people, they go in hiding and they never get caught. There's no proof. So maybe they get ousted by some people, but that's it. Then they move on and the bad guys get smarter. What we want is we want to give a file to a law enforcement agent that says, go kick this door down over there and arrest that guy. And that guy's in prison. And so 3 years ago, I started the ILF, made it a nonprofit. You're right. I am in shock of how fast we grew. We have almost 50 volunteers now, four full-time employees. We just closed our 126th case for the year.
Wow.
Yep. So it's only July 3rd, and we just closed our 126th case that we handed off to law enforcement. So we've been extremely busy, and it's been mind-blowing, really amazing.
Oh, that's just phenomenal. I mean, I can't believe it. I mean, you said about law enforcement, and around the world, obviously can't guarantee where these people are. So do you think your social engineering skills have kind of helped you a little bit with communicating to law enforcement? And because that must be difficult, right? There's going to be a lot of agencies that are maybe a bit suspicious of what you're doing. And, you can't really say as a group of hackers have got together and we're going to hunt down these people. That's probably not going to go down too well.
So two things have helped me. One is, yes, the SE skills help me to communicate better. And second is that when I go to my classes, I always tell stories about the ILF in my classes because I never know who's sitting there. And I learned very early on that if I tell these stories, sometimes there's a person in the class who works for a government agency, but they just didn't tell me because they didn't want to come to class and broadcast it. And after the class is over, they'll pull me aside and they'll say, hey, I work for Interpol, or I work for the CIA, or I work for this. I'd love to keep in contact about these cases. And then I make these amazing connections with these folks that say, we want to help you. And it's been like life altering to have these connections that I was able to build because of my corporate life. So it kind of just was the perfect storm to start this and to make it happen. And it's really been great. It is.
What sort of were do you think the main challenges were in setting this up?
There were so many challenges, so for us, I think probably one of the primary challenges was because we had a strict set of rules of what we would and would not do and what had to happen with the information. I needed to have good law enforcement contacts so that way the information was usable. Otherwise, what are we doing? I'm doing all this work for what? It's not for fun. So it's got to be usable. So that was a big challenge.
Right, because I guess whilst you're working on stuff, that data is pretty sensitive, isn't it?
It is. And, if we, in these 126 cases, we make a connection, you don't want that getting leaked. You don't want mob mentality, right? You don't want that file getting somewhere and then, Joe Smith's getting his head bashed in by a bunch of angry neighbors. You don't want that. You want this guy in prison, and hopefully, if he's part of a network, that network getting exposed and all of them ending up in prison. So you have to treat the data sensitive, and you also have to be willing that sometimes we work cases and they go nowhere. We can't find it. We can't find the connection. We can't make it. So you have to have people that you're willing to sit back and go, yeah, oof, that really sucks, and I'm gonna accept, and I hate to use the word, but I'm gonna accept failure in this case. And that feels bad when you know that this person was just hurting a child. Because you want them to go, but you have to be able to go, okay, look, I'm going to go to sleep at night and I'm still going to rest. I did my best. This one I couldn't get this one.
Where can people go to read about the Innocent Lives Foundation?
So innocentlivesfoundation.org is the best place. Tons of information. If you're like, hey, I don't know if I can handle that content, fine. There's stuff for parents on there. We have a guide on how to monitor iPhones, how to monitor Androids, how to monitor Windows devices. We have how to talk to your kids about groomers online. We have all these different educational pieces for parents and schools on there. And then we have places you can donate and places you can volunteer if you're interested. So, but there's lots of information on that site, innocentlivesfoundation.org. And I think there's even a link to the ILF Fest thing that we're doing.
And where can people kind of check out your podcast and your Instagram live that you're doing now, which I tune into, I really enjoy, and follow you generally?
And you're going to be on the Instagram live too coming
up. I am.
Yes, we should definitely say that. So social-engineer.com is all the corporate-y stuff. Social-engineer.org is the not nude. It is the newsletter and podcast. I don't know where that came from. Newsletter and podcast. Wow, that was a Freudian slip. There's no nudity on social-engineer.org for anyone watching this. Okay. Podcast is on iTunes and it's on Spotify now, which is totally exciting. And it's on a bunch of other networks, so you can find it there. And then the Instagram is Social-Engineer LLC.
So Chris is an amazing writer. He's written so many books, all of which, sort of as a massive fangirl, I have all of them. I have the entire collection. And I will put the links to every single one of them in the description so you can go and check them out. They are all absolutely awesome.
Don't buy the first one, people. Don't do it.
Okay, don't.
Just buy
all of them are awesome.
Yeah,
especially the science of human hacking.
That's my favorite
one, which is the last one.
That's my favorite.
But thank you so much for coming, Chris. Really appreciate it. And all the links from everything we've discussed in the show will be in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much.